everyone at the Writers Unlimited evening. Tonight we'll hear three authors from 3 countries with 3 novels, all threes, about immigrants who find their way in a new land. Next to me, Rodan Al-Ghalidi with 2 blankets, 3 sheets, and then Pierre Jarawan with The Storyteller, and Annelies Verbeke with 30 Days. And I, of course, and my name is Fiep van Bodegom, and I'm the moderator tonight. And I'll introduce, of course, the writers more at length at the next card. Next to me is Rodan Al-Ghalidi, and we're here because of this book that just appeared in English with World Editions. Rodan is a Dutch writer of Iraqi descent, a trained engineer who fled his native Iraq in 1992 and came to the Netherlands in 1998. He writes both prose and poetry in Dutch, a language you learned yourself. And since 2000 he published 9 collections of poetry, and most recently Koelkastlicht from 2016, and named the titel Serieus, both published with uitgeverij Jurgen Maas. But he also wrote novels, The Autist and the Postduif, The Autist and the Carrier Pigeon, and which won the EU Prize for Literature, and has been translated in 8 languages. Yeah. Also, yeah. And now there's this English translation by Jonathan Reeder of this book. He's a very productive man, because besides there's also a sequel of this book, Holland, that just came out this month also, this week even.
7 February.
Ah, okay, this month.
I think I need a microphone.
You have one,
yeah.
Or not?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
That would be nice, yes. And maybe we'll start with listening to a little piece from 2 blankets, 3 sheets.
Yeah.
And I'll ask your translator to read something.
Why have you come here? I saw the anger on his face. He asked questions to which he expected no answer. I glanced at my police escort and saw that his eyes were glazed over. In Iraq, I would now be tied up as if I'd done something wrong. But here, there were no chains, no steel cables on the walls. There was only a portrait of the Dutch Queen, with a crown on her head and a gentle smile on her lips. It was an ordinary office, like you'd expect in a bank. Why don't you people solve your own problems? The man asked. We're not responsible for solving the world's problems, are we? The 7 years I had spent between escaping from Iraq and now here at Schiphol Airport shot through my mind. 7 years of hunger, of roaming, and of fear. The immigration police had bitten me at many border crossings, all because I lacked that thin, small book. That book without any poetry in it at all. A passport. To this last question, though, the man did seem to expect an answer. My gaze returned to the portrait of the Queen behind him, and an answer came to me from a book I had once read about World War II, about the bombardment of Rotterdam and the evacuation of the Dutch royal family. I said, Sir, your queen fled during World War II without solving the problems in her country, even though she had an army, a secret service, a nation, and money. How am I supposed to solve my problems in Iraq when I'm just a civilian without even a kitchen knife?
Thank you. That was Jonathan Reeder, the translator of this version. What we just heard was actually the first episode of something that would turn out to take, or in the book, turns out to take 8 to 9 years.
Is it what?
No.
Oh yeah, it's work now. Yes. Now it's work. Yeah.
So it's 8 years of, and the reader follows all people who live in the AZC.
Yes, first they didn't send me to the AZC, but they sent me to the OC. And then you wait if there is an empty place in the AZC, and then they sent you there. I spent also 6 months in the OC.
And in the book, you tell us about all the people you met in these years. Not even all of them. You end with there were hundreds more you could not describe.
I was first in the OC Haarlem, very big OC, the biggest in Holland, 750 people. It was a big building. And then they sent me after a few months, because there is no place, to the farm in Appelscha in Assen.
Appelscha.
It was wonderful. We were just 30 refugees, about 500 cows. Koeien.
Cows.
And
Yes.
with the cows, you have no problem, but with the refugees around you, you have a bigger problem. With the cows, you get a lot of milks from the farmers, but with the refugees, is some fighting against each other.
Did you start right away to make notes, or did you do it all afterwards, writing? Because we have all these small episodes in which we follow the people you met and how you met them and what happened to them.
No, I never write notes in my book, or to write a book. I don't have a good imagination, but I have a good experience with the people who meet me. And when I want to write about them, I just remember the face and everything coming. I don't imagine anything from the person. It's very easy for me to write book.
But still, it is a novel.
I don't know if you can call it a novel, because novel, you have a nice story, you read it fast, then you enjoy reading, but this is a lot of people sitting in one place, and they just waiting all these years for a small paper from the
I'm a
IND.
bit distracted by...
No, it is okay.
Okay, no, stop, sorry.
Yeah.
You're in the same place with a lot of people,
Yeah.
and you have time to get to know them, and you will, of course, never forget.
You must get them to know, because if you are a gay, you get a room for you alone. If you are a woman without family, you get a place for you alone. But if in every refugees come, they have one room, that means must be just one gay, and 2 rooms for girls. And
So
then
you always had
you must
roommates
share
and,
the room
you shared everything.
with 4 or 5 people. Because every time when another Aziz Zucker is coming, refugees, they put a new bed between the beds, and it look like you ever eat a sardine, you know? When you open the
Like in a
sardine,
tins
even
of,
same when you open the door in the room in the refugees camp. Yeah.
And this episode we just heard was just the beginning, and I was wondering, you describe beautifully all these different people, and
But
also...
this situation was, it's easy to read, but the man, he was, you know, I grow up with the American movies. When they catch somebody criminal, or they say, don't say anything, you have a right for a lawyer, and these things we saw in the Middle East. I thought, wonderful, I'm not a criminal. I'm sure I have a right in the lawyer or something, but when I came in the Schiphol, they treat me as, not as animal, because they are very sweet with animals. But with a bigger problem, you are not a human, but not animal. You are a bigger problem. You are refugees, and they must give you complete life. And then they are very stressed and angry, but they are really not not, they don't use violence, but they are really angry. They don't want you to come.
I was wondering, because you've met so many people, both who were desperate and waiting, but also people who were employees, civil servants who had a little bit of power over all these people and also a lot of responsibility. What, in your opinion, kept some people humane? Because there was also, you also meet Samir, the character in the book, also meets a lot of very generous people and friendly people.
You have in Dutch people working in the refugees camp, two kind of people. People enjoying to have a power. They stay working years. And people are very sensitive. They come to help refugees. After 1 or 2, maybe 3 years, they quit the job, they get tired. And then you have always the powerful people, little bit aggressive, they have the experience. And they dominated the people are coming to work just for 1 or 2 or 3 years. And you know the American movie, Somebody Fly Out the Cuckoo's Nest? This is just little part of the refugees camp. It's just in 1 second from the life. Not somebody, thousands fly or the falling in the refugee. It is so Kafka in one side, but in another side, you get crazy. And if you want to go to another country, you are not allowed to go because you have the finger of the guy. I don't know what in English.
The fingerprint, yes.
Yeah,
the land
you are
where,
allowed
the where
to
you
be just
the
in
European
Holland.
Union. Yes.
And I went to Norway, they sent me back. Sweden sent me back. German sent me back. And every time when they send you back, they don't say to you, go. No, they sent you in a very big box from iron and sitting like that.
Yeah, you described
and
a few very...
and you must start from the beginning, the process in Holland.
Again
They
and
don't
again.
start, they don't say, oh, you're back, or come back. No.
We already know you by now.
Yeah, and that is really, you know the hill of Dante Alighieri, these circles.
In the
Dante Alighieri with Virgilio coming like that, and he go until the down. Is you go from all this Azizuker Centro, and in the end you see the END, the person of...
The deepest pit of hell.
Yeah, it is.
The book is quite sold well and is much discussed. Did you ever got a reaction from somebody working from the END or the...
Not the END. I get a reaction from 2 refugees. One, he said to me, I am little bit disappointed because you was not serious with our pain. You make a lot of joke. And one refugee is John, sitting there. He came also in 1998, and he said, I'm happy you wrote this book because I don't need to tell my children about what we get there. I give them your book, and then they read it. And John, he coming always to my readings, and he feel every sentence because it's his life also.
And also, even though it's, of course, a very touching book about all this time that is wasted and lost, but you also told me you try to you give every episode a certain form, like...
But I want to tell you something positive. Until now, I am negative.
Yes, but you told me about how you write
They didn't kill me in the refugees camp. The last 4 years, I lost my brother because IS attack in Baghdad, and then my sister, so I lost her. And if these 2 nice person was in the refugees camp, they are still alive. Is what I never feel angry of the system in Holland, because not Holland made from me refugees, but Iraq. This idea made me still positive and not disappointed or something. And that you read it in the book always. Yeah.
And for you, what would be, for who did you write it?
Yeah, you know, I cannot lie about this, but these people, they don't have Facebook, I think. I
No?
will tell the story, you want the story of the book, eh? I went with Adrian van Dis to Turkey. And he asked me, I heard you spent a lot of time in refugees camp. And told me something about it. I said, no. He said, why? I said, I blocked it here. I will get depressed. He said, tell me about one situation. And I told him about in the corner, in the Hoekistan is a straf in the other say. And Adriaan van Dis get red from angry. He said, you must write a book about. He said to me, can you send me every month a story? I said, no. He said to me, no, promise me. I said, I get shy from this man like that. I said, I promise you. He followed me 3.5 years. Every month, he said, I'm waiting for your story. And it was all the book, Beste Adriaan. You remember last month? I will tell you later, but now I will go. It's just, you feel that somebody else is listening. It's not a book for people, it's just for this man. And I thought
Who showed interest.
Yeah, and I thought he will make a book from it.
Ah, that he would make a book from it, from
his
your
material.
experience. Yeah.
But what he did, when it finished, no one knew about that. Just emails between me and him. And I promised him, I thought he's very famous. After 2 months, he will forget it. But he followed me. And when its book finished, I said, this is your book? He said, he called me in that time. He said, threw my name away and sent it to the publisher. That is the story.
And this is how
and
this book
I
came
never say it in the media. That is the book written for Adriaan van Dis. But in the foreword, I said, somebody asked me.
And
This is really the father of the book and the verloskundige also. And the crash also. My English is not very well.
And now there is a book following a time in the Netherlands, Holland. Could you tell us something?
It's just published. I thought it's not honest. The person sits in the system of Holland. And the system of Holland is, because of the life is very rich, the system is very ugly. Because it's very hard. A lot of people working very hard. And I thought it's not honest to give some bill like that. I must follow the person in Holland, in the society.
So this is too much a one-sided
and I couldn't write it all the time. And I print a picture of Adriaan of this. I put it in my room where I write.
Okay.
And always, best Adriaan, I went. And then I throw his name after.
Adriaan van Dis has so many uses.
Yeah.
So for right. Thank you.
Thank you very
so much.
Thank
I would also like to continue with your neighbor, Pierre Jarawan. Also, thank you for being here all the way from, this time from Amsterdam, but normally from Munich. You wrote also a book that came out with World Editions, The Storyteller. I will introduce you shortly. Born to a Lebanese father and a German mother, and moved to Germany with your family at the age of 3. And inspired by your father's imaginative bedtime stories, you started writing at the age of 13. This is your debut novel, in which you uses these bedtime stories as a frame and a start for the book itself. And I was wondering, would you like to start with reading a small part from the beginning?
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want me to stand up? Or?
Whatever you would prefer.
I can sit.
Maybe now that we're here.
As a boy, I felt an insatiable longing to see Lebanon. It was like the enormous curiosity inspired by a legendary beauty no one has ever seen. The passion and fervor in the way father spoke about his native land spread to me like a fever. The Lebanon I grew up with was an idea. The idea of the most beautiful country in the world, its rocky coastline dotted with ancient and mysterious cities whose colorful harbors opened out to the sea. Behind them, countless winding mountain roads, flanked by river valleys whose fertile banks provided a perfect soil for world-famous wine. We stood on a lake shore, breathing the same air and sharing the same longing. In my opinion, after love for another, there is no stronger bond between two people than a shared longing. But I also remember how my father's arm felt heavier and heavier on my shoulders. His breathing became deeper and deeper, his gaze more and more trance-like, as if he were no longer looking at the ships, but at some point in the distance. The reason I remember it so clearly is that it was one of the last days we spent together.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And as the last sentence already told us, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that the father disappears, and the novel is the search for what happened to him and where he is. And this search is also the history of Lebanon in the last 3 decades.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell me something more about the research? How did you, because it's very much a historical, you give a lot of historical information about Lebanon. How and why did you want to put that in this way in the novel?
Mm-hmm. Well, in the beginning I wanted to write a novel about the second generation of immigrants like myself, and and when I started doing the research on Lebanon, I realized that it's impossible to write about the country without writing about politics, because everything there is political. If you wear a yellow jacket and you go into one district, this could be a political statement just because of the color, so everything there is political. So I realized that I had to stop writing what I was writing at that point and do more research. And in the end, it gave me many ideas for the book, and I realized that it made sense to connect the history of the country to the history of the family, and that's why you're right. There's a lot of historic events in the book, but that's what I always liked reading. I was always more influenced by, I would say, American literature, right? Because they always managed to tell a story and to tell history at the same time. So you are always entertained and you learn something while being entertained. And I always was fascinated by that kind of literature, and that's what I tried with my book.
Yeah, like it's really like a page turner of what happened and how all the little pieces come together. And you also reference Philip Marlowe, the Raymond Chandler, the hard-boiled detective story, which is was that also a kind of an example or like a?
No, it wasn't. Not really as a role model, but you're right. You can read this book as detective fiction because there's the mystery to be solved. You can read it as a story about immigration or the history of refugees. It's also a history of the Middle East because everything is connected there again. The history of Syria is very tightly connected to the history of Lebanon and Israel. So, I think that, as you said, you can, if you just read the book as a suspenseful story and you close it and you said, I was well entertained, that's fine, but I think there's more to it.
Yes, I think so too, and we can discuss that further. But I would also like to introduce, or further introduce, your neighbor Annelies Verbeke, a Belgium writer, and I'm looking for my introduction. Short stories, novels, plays, 3 collections of short stories and 4 novels, and 2 of them were published in English with world editions, 30 Days, the blue book over there, and Assumptions, Veronderstellingen. And in 2018, you also made a wonderful theater piece with the collective Wunderbaum, White Male Privilege, a very funny analysis of race and inclusivity among a seemingly progressive white editorial team of a magazine. And in 30 days, we follow 30 days in the life of the empathetic musician and handyman Alphonse, who has just settled in rural West Flanders, and likable, self-contained, and noticeable black against this background. His clients tell their life stories to him in these days. And I also wanted to ask you to read a little fragment about happiness.
Yes. As he spoons his soup, he reads the newspaper. Dyslexia means he has to hold the letters of every word more slowly than he'd like into their places. This time, the exhaustion induced by the struggle is outweighed by his interest in the article. One of the leaders of the largest party calls herself fundamentally happy. That touches him. He's never felt any connection with a woman, but he has secretly called himself that too, not long ago either, fundamentally happy. Things in common, connections he's not seen before, are less a source of confusion than a summary hope. He had a similar feeling on reading an article about love letters an extreme right-wing politician wrote to his late mistress. Soyons heureux, vivons cachés, the man told her in one of them. Let's be happy, hidden away. The French saying, which slipped out of a Flemish nationalist in a moment of passion, has often passed through Alphonse's mind. It would have different resonances for Kat, who is Alphonse's wife, by the way. Now that they've been living here for almost a year, it turns out the advantages of isolation escape her. In any case, she'd find it a less than credible slogan for Alphonse, a man who devotes so much time and attention to complete strangers. In the context of the extreme right, that vivons cachés carries a hint of a back turned, a slammed door followed by crossed arms, a knot in my backyard, and a fist shaken at whoever dares walk past the window. But inside that house are the man and his sweetheart. For a moment, Alphonse clearly sees the connection, a brightening bundle of immaterial threads between the most diverse people who, perhaps only sporadically, perhaps only now, find their fundamental happiness in isolation. A child at play, Lego brick imprints on its bottom, mouth slightly open, an elderly Russian lady murmuring in front of an icon in a St. Petersburg church. The politician dreaming during a power nap, alone and united with the woman he misses. A Chilean singer disappearing into her song, sitting on her bed in front of a mirror, and he himself here, moved, close to tears. Dozens, thousands of others are on the point of taking shape, of soaring up, when the feeling disappears into the background just as abruptly, giving way to embarrassment, a dry cough, the sound of the dishwasher, his new habit of looking through the window to the far side of the street to check that no fresh posters have gone up. He finishes his soup. Is fundamental happiness a conceit, an illusion? Can it be taken away?
Thank you. I was wondering, would you consider this an optimistic book?
Yeah, well, I keep on wondering about that myself because, well, it's always hard to talk about this book because I don't want to give away the ending, but it is quite important to the rest of the book. But anyway, I can tell you that the ending is not the most happy ending you can imagine. And a lot of readers were very shocked by that. So I never, with any book that I wrote, got so many really emotional feedback, actually, from people who said, like, all the time you make us believe that we can be good people and that that goodness exists, and then you take it away from us. And this was not how I meant it exactly. I think in the book I do grant goodness a right to be, and I say that it does exist. But on the other hand, it doesn't protect you for anything. It's not like it protects you against evil because you are a good person. It doesn't work that way, very unfortunately. And also the Bible story of Job plays a role in the book. And this is actually, I think, what is very fundamental, apart from Alphonse's happiness, also in people in general, that they feel a fundamental need to be to get something in return for their good deeds in a way, or to at least not be stabbed in the back. There is, in Job, of course, everybody knows it, this feeling of, why have you chosen me to have all this bad luck? I have never done anything wrong. And I think this is fundamentally in all of us. Like, why me when something goes bad? So yes, for me it is both, and I think life is both. It's very hard to say. Is it eventually all okay, or is it eventually some dark universe? And I myself, it probably has to do with hormones and such as well, but I can think one day the one thing and the other day something completely different, and it probably is both. I mean, it is as well good and bad, yeah.
And both is in the book, of course, the dark and the very beautiful light and lyrical side.
But I was a bit surprised, I must say, that for me the ending is very much prepared in the book. I mean, I really did my best to give little hints all the way, in fact. And some people completely caught this tension that is there, because this is actually a main character who has no real problems at the moment, who feels quite happy in his skin. And it is quite strange when you have a main character like that, and I really wanted to, and I never did this before. But then I know that life is not that kind. It will come from outside. If it's not coming from inside of you, like the destruction, then it will come towards you from outside. And yeah, this is, I think, prepared, and some people picked it up, others didn't. Yeah.
So actually quite a pessimistic answer, like a happy person or a happy character in a novel already should warn every reader that something horrible is going to happen, actually, or something.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But maybe also for not so much whether you're optimist or a pessimist, but are you as a writer an optimist or a pessimist, in the sense that you, of course, both describe a world, but do you also have a sense that it is in some way an intervention of what you describe, or that it would do something in the world?
I don't really think in that category. I mean, I think this book and also my new book, I believe in that it's in the power of stories, that in a way that they can, oppose, for example, forgetting or suppression of certain questions, or they can contribute to a change of perspective. But I'm not saying that, for example, in this regard, someone who has a problem with refugees, he will not read my book and be another person afterwards. But I can offer him a different perspective for as long as the book lasts, and I think that's what stories can do, right? I can tell you numbers. So many people have died in the Mediterranean while crossing it in their boat. So many refugees have arrived there or there. So many people have died in the Syrian civil war. But these are numbers, and we are used to them, and we don't care anymore. But if I tell you a story about it, numbers become persons, and persons become stories. And I believe in this I believe, but I don't really think in categories like I'm trying to change something. I just believe in the power of a narrative.
Thank you. And for you, Adan?
I changed really a lot about how I work with the book. And something happened with me once and changed me how I write. I was sitting in a train from Zwolle to Rotterdam. And somebody was reading my novel. En de novel, de name is Mijn opa, de president en de andere dieren. En ik vond dit geweldig boek toen. But no one here read it all. Just me, a redactor of the publisher.
The editor. Your editor.
Yeah, the editor. But in the train I was shamed because there is a man, he had the book. And he didn't know who I am, and he was just reading like that, and he put it away. I thought, I cannot get him until Utrecht, maybe Rotterdam, no. But he stopped in Amersfoort with reading my book, and he threw it in his bag. And I was the best redacteur ooit. Now, when I'm writing a book, I think a lot about that man.
Not your editor, but like this, the man you didn't know who was reading your book in the train.
Totally thinking about the reader now.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
That he must enjoy reading.
But how do you know what he or she will enjoy?
Because I have now 4 or 5 people in Zwolle. They don't like reading books. When I am busy with the book, I invite them. I make very nice food for them, and they read the chapters. And if they keep reading, I say, it was nice. If they said, oh, it's boring, I change it really a lot. And from the book Holland, I throw away 40,000 words. It was because poetic, nice, analysis about the character, and the main character, I throw him away. I made him just a very normal person. I didn't give him a lot of space in the book. I really changes to how I work now. I want the people enjoy my book.
I enjoyed this book.
Yeah,
even though,
maybe this is the first book what the people can read it. But another novels was really very bad written books. Yeah. Because I was thinking in Arabic, writing in Dutch with a lot of dictionaries.
Yeah.
Sometimes I use a word from the dictionary what the Dutch people even don't know what means, and me also even I don't know. And it was a really chaos. What is chaos in English?
Yes.
Chaos.
Yeah, it's chaos.
Yeah.
But now no. If you read me, I just elke hoofdstuk moet glijbaan. The reader come here and go away. It's until the end van the book. Yes, I do my best with that.
I think I missed the line.
Ja, ik ga het in het Nederlands zeggen. Ik wil graag nog echt leesbare boeken.
Okay,
waar
really readable books.
De reader lacht en plezier heeft. Als hij moet geopereerd worden in een ziekenhuis, wordt de pijn minder. Als hij een burn-out heeft, wordt het minder. Als hij depressief wordt, minder. Dit is mijn boodschap nu voor elke boek.
Okay.
Ik kan niet transleren in Engels, ook niet.
Okay, so...
Ja, het moet echt... en moet echt niet iets van mij, het boek. Dat meneer Al-Khalidi is mijn karakter en mijn taalgebruik. Nee. Al die personen moeten de ruimte hebben in het boek. All the persons, they must have the power.
Okay, I'll
but
translate.
Not me and the main
I'll translate.
character. Oh, yeah.
You told me you find it hard to be maybe too positive about the books you already have written.
Yeah.
So I will do it for you.
Yeah.
And I think this is a very good book that learns you and teaches you and makes you to get to know so many different people in such a lovely way in which you have seen them and give attention to them, and also give the reader the opportunity to get to know them. This is why I think it's a very
thank
good
you
book.
very much.
We all should read. I don't know what time it is, but if there is any questions from the audience, there's also, of course, always a chance and a microphone. And even if you want to ask them in Dutch, we can translate them. There are enough people here together. Would there be any questions?
Did you read each other's books?
I read Rodin's, this book of Rodin I read.
I like her short stories and her novels. I follow her, but the last book, no. I like the way how she read. I can listen a lot of time. I met her in some reading. She read in very sensitive, nice way. You will just hear it. But in Vlaams is nog mooier. Oh yeah.
So maybe another question. Oh, sorry. Is there also, maybe we can do both. There's another question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering about you. Have you learned from your last book, which ended not so positive? Are you going to change it in the future, or don't you care?
Sorry, what was it? I didn't understand.
The end of your last book was not very positive.
Yes,
So
well, there
maybe
are
it was
two books
disappointing.
after this one, but
Okay,
yeah.
so, okay. But
Yeah.
anyway, did you change because of that the reactions of the readers? I mean,
Change what?
change your way of ending the story. Is
So
there?
did it influence the way you ended the planned ending of the books that came afterwards?
Of course not. No.
The readers
no,
not that
but the
important.
readers were in general very moved also, but they were quite shocked. But I mean, literature is not about absolutely not shocking the reader. I mean, this is not what we are supposed to do. If somebody's shocked, yes, okay, there was at least a reaction, or and not everybody was shocked. I mean, there were just more emotional reactions to this book than to my other books, I think. But no, I always do as I please, and in fact, I sometimes have the feeling, and I didn't dare to say that out loud for quite some years, and then I understood that Céline and Borges, they quite said the same, and then I mentioned their names, and then I have this shield of powerful men, and I am not taken to the psychiatric institution, but what I feel, in fact, is that the story already exists. And David Lynch actually also has said it very beautifully. He says for his films, there is this man in the other room who sometimes flips him little images and little pieces of the bigger picture. And for me, it's exactly like that. I always have the feeling that I am not inventing a story, but I am some kind of, I don't know, medium, yes. This is quite, yeah. I am not like in my room, you know, like being the medium, but I am working very hard, in fact. But on the other hand, it feels like that I always feel that there is a right way to tell this story that somewhere, maybe in a parallel universe, already exists. And so in this way, there is no way that I could ever listen to readers or reviewers or, yeah.
And also you give as one reason that readers were shocked that because it was a shocking end, but another explanation is that the character is so lovable.
Yeah.
We feel with him and we want the best for him, I guess, even though it's...
So
absolutely. That's the reason why it's maybe also...
And I myself, I always know the ending of the novels that I write from the beginning, because I am not like the very planned writer, but this I have to know. I have to know where I stop, and I have to know where I'm going to. And in this case, so I knew for 2 years where I was going to, and when I finally got there, I actually didn't change anything on this last chapter because it was prepared in my head for a long, long time. And when I wrote it, also because it takes a long time, a lot of effort to write a book, but when I wrote it, I have cried for 2 hours. And I think it's also because I had a lot of Jesus figures, you could say, throughout my work. And it was like, this time I let go of this kind of character. And then, yeah, for me too, it was an emotional, well, thing to write this book. Absolutely, yeah.
Pierre, maybe your process or your practice of writing is much more research-based, I have the impression, or is it also this idea of an image or a vision that starts the book?
I mean, research is I do the research before I write, so it's not part of the writing process. The book in Germany, in Holland the title is different. It's called De Zoon van de Verhalenverteller, so the son of the storyteller. In English, it's the storyteller, and in Germany the title is Am Ende bleiben die Zedern, something like in the end the cedars, the remain. And I had this sentence before I had anything.
And the cedars are the national symbol.
The national symbol of Lebanon. The French translation, they had the same title because in France when they say cedars they know it's Lebanon because of the history but anyway I had this sentence Am Ende bleiben die Zedern before I had anyway, and with the sentence there came a feeling of thinking of Lebanon and also being torn apart somehow with feeling love for the country on the one hand, feeling disappointed by the country on the other hand, and from this is the way it starts. It's the motor that and then you build everything around this feeling, and it keeps you driving, and you take the books and you start doing the research, and it builds up. So, but the beginning in this case was just the sentence.
Yeah, but I also ask because you said before that this idea of the power of a narrative to tell stories that are maybe not told, but also because of your next book that is titled and will come out in May.
Here in the Netherlands.
Lied van de Vermiste.
Yeah, and Lied voor de Vermiste.
Lied voor de Vermiste, pardon. Could you maybe also tell more about that?
Yes, with the second book I go back to Lebanon again, and it will be about you have to see that in Lebanon since the end of the Civil War, it ended in 1990, until today 17,000 people are still missing. You have this probably in every country that has experienced civil wars, because making people disappear is just part of wars. But then this from many countries. That there are Los Desaparecidos in Argentina, for example. There are many movies, many books. That from other countries, but most people have never heard that that's the case in Lebanon. And we're talking about 17,000 people in a country with 4 million inhabitants. So there's basically every third or fourth family missing someone, and they disappeared during the 80s, during the war, but they're still missing. So this is a topic that is still not being dealt with. It is something it's a big taboo, and nobody talks about it in Lebanon. And there it comes back to my theory of writing, that you can force someone to remember by telling a story about something, and this is what I tried with the second book. It's again a family story. It's no sequel. It's very different. Also, the style is a little bit different, but it's again, you can read it as a suspense story, because again you have the mystery, but the topic is the 17,000 people gone missing in Lebanon.
And because this book ends with somebody writing a history book.
Yeah.
But you are writing novels. Why the difference? Why not the...
Well, this comes from the story. This is in the book. There's a group of students. Samir, the protagonist, he meets in Beirut, and you have to know that in Lebanon there is no history book covering the years of the Civil War being taught in schools. Why? Because they cannot agree on history. So you have 17 different religious groups, you have Maronite Christian, Greek Orthodox, and so on, Sunni Muslim, Shia Muslim, so it's 17 different groups. And they all have their own experience with the civil war, and they all had militias in the civil war. They were all fighting each other somehow. So what you have in Lebanon is you have 17 different stories or narratives about the war, and you have 16 guilty parties, and the one you grew up with is the only, of course, that hasn't done nothing wrong. And so I put this group of students inside the book. They don't exist, but it's you know, and they work together trying to write the first history book. So this is nothing to do with me, and so the question, why don't I write history books? Because I'm not a historian, I'm a novelist. It's a very simple answer. But I think having a history book or being able to agree on history would be a very big step for Lebanon, and that's why I projected this hope that someday they will be able, and also the hope that this step will come through the younger generation inside the book, but it's part of the story.
Yes.
Could you, as a writer, separate yourself from your religious background when you write about it?
Yes, because I don't have a religious background.
Maybe I should repeat the question. Could you, as a writer, separate yourself from your own religious background?
Yes, and I would not agree that everyone has a religious background. In my grad, I wasn't raised religiously. They didn't play.
You live in a society anyway.
Yeah.
You are breathing in a subculture anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you don't have to be believer, but
Yeah.
you have somehow a religious background. I'm not a believer, but I know what I'm coming from and where I'm coming from, and it's different to be a believer or believe in God or not, or believe in the religious. But as a writer, it's very. I just was curious if it's a part of the thing that you consciously pay attention to it. Just separate yourself from any other religious background when you write about Lebanon.
You know, maybe you have to understand
because especially in Lebanon, because the religious issue is very important.
Yes, you're right. Definitely.
That's why I'm questioning.
Yeah. Well, maybe you have to see my personal story, because my parents they left Lebanon in '82 when the war was too. It was just you just couldn't stay there anymore. It was too dangerous. So they went to Saudi Arabia first, and my brother was born there. Then they went to Jordan it's for work, and I was born in Jordan. And when I was 3 years old, we all came to Germany together. So I grew up in Germany since I was 3. I never grew up in Lebanon in a society that somehow, had really a religious impact on me. It never played a role in Germany. And I grew up with, I always say, I grew up with the best from both worlds. I grew up having a German mother. This is important as well. Never feeling being a stranger in Germany, because growing up German speaking and Arabic speaking, we had Lebanese food on the table. We spoke Lebanese Arabic with my father, and German with my mother, and every other one. From my appearance, you don't really see that I have this background. So I never faced any racism. So I grew up with No, but it's part of the answer. So it's part of the answer. It's very easy for me to separate myself from religion, because I never was coined from someone who grows up in Lebanon. And you're right, growing up in Lebanon, you grow up in a community that is much more based on religious views, and this was simply not the case from my perspective. And when I wrote the book, and many people from Lebanon or Lebanese community in Germany, they read the book. No matter which religious background they had, and this was the biggest compliment for me, they said, I appreciate that you, with maybe the eye of, it's an objective view. You make clear that nobody went out of this innocent, and if there is any solution to the future, it's the younger generation born after the war. So, and I appreciate that, and that's what I tried. So, yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. And maybe also going further on that, do you feel responsible, this is a question for all of you, to either describe certain experiences because they're your own, or that you're not allowed to describe certain experiences because they're not your own? Do you feel this?
Well, in my case, my main character has a Senegalese background. And of course, well, I was aware of well, the issues around cultural appropriation, and I was quite nervous about it. And then I think I would never have written this book if I was not together with a Senegalese man for 12 years now. And because of being with him, and also there are 2 kids, and I just got different views on how life is when you are black, and I wanted to say some things about that. But the book is not only about racism, and it is about many things, I think. But I did feel nervous about this, and I needed some support from my husband in the first place, and I asked him many questions, read a lot to him, and I needed some approval, I think, more than with any other book, and I got this approval. And then on the other hand, I cannot ask everybody's approval. I also am the writer, and there will always be somebody who does not agree. But in fact, I was very happy that I did get a lot of very nice comments by colleagues of mine with different backgrounds, and this was, I think, the biggest support. And the really bad, nasty remarks that I got were all by white people. So yeah, it's this issue of cultural appropriation. I will always try to be very cautious with it, but in the case of 30 days, I feel comfortable with it now. Yeah.
And for you, is it an issue that you feel responsible for certain experiences to depict them, to show them, or even that there are things you would be interested in writing about you maybe don't dare yet to do?
No, I mean, I was 30 when I wrote this book, so if I would only be able to write about my own experience, I would run out of stories sometime soon. I think it's. I'm also aware of this issue, cultural appropriation, or is it okay to write about someone experiencing the war without having experienced it? I think, yeah, of course you are allowed to do it, but it's your responsibility to do it well. Mm-hmm. So you have to live with it if someone tells you it's badly done. I think as a writer, you are allowed to write about anything, but you have to live with the consequences if it's done badly. I mean, for the second book I did the research. I talked to, in this case, Syrian refugees in Germany, and they talked to me about, experiences of war in Syria. But of course, if they tell you, how to cross a street as a child when there is a sniper in the street, you can use these experiences also when you're talking about Beirut, because and the question is not am I allowed to do this, but how am I doing it? Am I doing it with a voyeurism, point of view? Do I make it sensational, or do I make it, just authentic, without, without? I can describe it in a way, bullets flying and everything, but I choose not to do that. I choose not to have one bullet flying at all, but I choose to describe the fear that this could happen, for example. So it really depends on how you do it. But I think, yes, you are allowed to write about anything, but if it's done badly, it's your fault.
You're responsible for you. How is that for you?
When I write poems, I don't need experiences to write poems, but write novels, I had thousands of experiences in the life. We was refugees in our own country, from the south to the north. We was rich, very rich, then poor, very poor. We lost people, we lost dignities, we lost countries, nationalities. It's a lot of experiences. When I write, every sentence is something happening in my life. You can feel it. And the only thing what I change is I make it more funny than dramatic. Because I will tell you one story happened in Baghdad. I was a little boy, and the rocket falling on Baghdad. It was really the hill, and it was 50 degrees in the summer, and I was sitting with my father and my brothers, and I was a very sensitive boy. My father made care about me if I'm scared or not. He said, look to this racket. Oh, this is maybe on your ankle, or is dead maybe. Oh, this is the racket, oh, it's not on us. And he tell it as a story, the life and the death. And this technique to change the reality to something little bit sweet and funny, I use it now all the time in my books. Is this your question also?
No, but it's a beautiful answer, so it doesn't matter.
A little bit understand the question, but it's okay.
Yeah, so maybe you showed also beautifully that there is not that this relation between experience and what you write can be in
Dutch,
all kinds of ways.
I'm curious about the question now. Can you say it in Dutch? What was the question?
The question was of je bepaalde ervaringen of je bepaalde ervaringen verantwoordelijkheid voor hebt om die weer te geven, zoals bijvoorbeeld dat jij bepaalde personages in dit boek weergeeft, die echt hun als volledig mens weergeeft. En of er ook ervaringen zijn waar je misschien niet genoeg kennis van hebt of niet dichtbij genoeg staat om
No,
te mogen
I always write about something I know very well. And I experience it very well. And I have a problem with it. I must throw it away.
To write about it is to get rid of it.
It's kind of meditation for me, writing. I cannot imagine something and write about it. Yeah.
So there are a lot of ways to write that we've seen already. And also it's interesting the story you tell about your father telling about these... now I only know the word raketten, but that's not the word missiles. And telling you it's fireworks. It's a story that also is part of your book, incidentally. This father telling us a fairy tale-like story about war being beautiful, or like trying to comfort the child by telling it something else. It's just interesting line, or like a circle.
I want to tell you something. You cannot imagine how powerful is storytelling in the dramatic situation when life and death is so nearby each other. And then you have an old woman in the home and she brings you somewhere with some stupid stories. She can save you from very big fear, And that is the literature, that is the word, The great, I am not Christian, but I love the beginning of the Bible. In the beginning was the word, It's wonderful.
I think we cannot end better than this.
Okay, thank you.
Very quickly.
The theater.
Maybe I should repeat your question. There is also a play coming out based on this book or based on certain experiences from it. Could you say more about it, and are you happy about it, how it came out?
They asked me to sit with the reducer, but I refused. I said, this is your book. Do the theater in your way. But to be honest, I was crying in the dark when I was looking to it. Because in the book, I didn't have the power to scream, to say, fuck off, it's hard. But in the theater, this boy, he did it. And I cried. And I went to the florist, the writer of the theater. I said, now I see how powerful you have your country, your system, and you are allowed to scream on the theater. I didn't do that in the book. I like the theater, but I saw my people in the theater, but not my book. But I'm happy that they did it very different. Now it's not boring for me.
And also, you didn't want them to do the
No,
same thing again,
yeah,
but
yeah,
wanting
no.
to make
It
something
will be
new out of it.
repeating, you know. It's mostly, yeah.
We do have some time, actually. So if somebody else still has a pressing question.
So, good evening. I just actually have two questions. The first of them is one, the title of this evening is Through the Eyes of the Immigrant. When does one stop being an immigrant? And the second one is about fiction and cultural appropriation. Isn't fiction actually also a chance to use fantasy to get away from a certain very small, perhaps small narrative when it comes to appropriating? Because if cultural appropriation means that men can write about the feelings of women or blacks can write about the feelings of whites, what is actually left for fiction?
Two big questions, but I think very relevant, so I hope one of you...
I'm refugees. I will answer the first question, and they are intellectual people. They will answer. If you are refugees, you will never stop to be a human. You will never be human. You have not possibility to be tourist or a rich man, businessman, or a student. These three, they are valuable in this planet. But refugees, we are not welcome in our body, not in your country, not in my country. You are always less than a human. This is my experience as refugees, and I call myself in Holland Aziz Zoeker des Vaderland. Thank you. And another question they will.
Yeah. I think you are right that in a way art and literature more than the other arts maybe is in se an appropriation. I mean, you take up the appearance of somebody else. This is what you usually do. And I do not think that you should only tell your own story, autobiographical story. I think, I am now reading a lot of classics. I am just reading The Golden Donkey by Apuleius, which is about a man who transforms into a donkey. I mean, Apuleius also in the 2nd century past Christ had the feeling like, let's not make it my own story, but let's transform into a donkey. I mean, it's much more fun, and I understand. And I don't want to compare donkeys with my Alphonse, but I did transform into a bear in Hallelujah, in a short story collection. But of course, in the case of a black immigrant in Belgium, there is a whole lot of history around this issue, and I am in a position which has the power. White people, I am a woman, which makes it a bit different maybe, but yeah, of course I want to be really, really cautious about this, and this is not about self-censorship. This is about the kind of caution you always need with writing, I think. You really have to make it as real as possible. And real in the sense of the reader has to have the feeling also when everything is put together and is invention and taking some stories here and there. Even then, the reader has to feel this is a real person. So, yeah, and I think if you manage to do that, usually the issue of cultural appropriation will be okay. Because I did read books, in fact, in which I really hated the way it was done. And I didn't want this here because there are so many books in which when a white person writes about a black person, that they mention how those white teeth are in this face. And I really, started noticing, and also the fact that you mention that somebody is black as a white writer, it actually shows very well that the norm is white. So we all presume if we read something, this is a white person. And I found it very, very important that I made the reader take place in the body of my main character, and only after 30 pages, after how people react to him, they understand, oh, this person in whose head I am is black. And I heard some white people about that saying, this was really strange, because I asked myself, do I have to see this different now? Why am I asking myself this question? Why should I see it differently? Or do I? Or like that. And this is very nice to hear that with some readers it was exactly the effect that I wanted in that sense. So this is what I mean with caution. Yeah.
Still thinking. Well, I mean, for the first question, maybe it's a matter of generation. First generation, you came alone, right? Yeah, so first generation immigrants, second generation, and I think it differs somehow, maybe it differs also from how you perceive yourself and how you are perceived. So, for example, I think my father never stops being an immigrant, and he left Germany years ago because he didn't feel at home. It was just too much for him. So now he lives in the Emirates. But I think even if he had the ability for himself to say, "Okay, I have arrived," my daughter, my sister, she's born in Germany, and we have a life here. He would always be perceived as a foreigner, right? Just because of his appearance and everything. So for me, it's different, as I explained before. You don't really see it when you see me. And I never had the feeling of being a foreigner in Germany. I know I'm privileged in that way because my mother is German. I know it's very different from many friends of mine. But speaking for me, I've always considered myself a German when I was in Germany and Lebanese when I was in Lebanon. And I don't know if you know the word Heimat in Germany, right? It's interesting because Heimat, there is no plural of that word in Germany, right? So grammar basically tells you that you cannot have more than one. And Heimat is not like home or home country. Heimat it's more like a concept, a whole concept of belonging somewhere. And so grammar tells you you know. So when I was a child and people asked me, what do you consider your Heimat? I said Germany and Lebanon, and they almost insisted that I decide, and I never had the feeling that I needed to decide because it was clear to me that, you know. So I think if I decide to have a child, he will be German probably. He will feel German, or he or she will feel German, but still I will take him or her to Lebanon and say, this is where my father came from, this is where your relatives are, but yeah. And I was never perceived as an immigrant. Now that I have the book, I'm perceived as one. I was never German Lebanese. Now, since the book came out, I was German Lebanese writer immediately. See, so it's not a choice I made. So.
Yeah.
So do you resent it a little bit that it's pigeonholed in this sense?
It's really it's difficult, and it's a love-hate relationship with that, because on the one hand it makes evenings like this possible. I know I'm invited here because of this background and because of the book. I don't have the illusion, right? So, and because I can say something about this topic, so it allows me to make a living from what I love. On the other hand, this is what makes me sad about it, right? So I'm just invited because of this background, and so yeah, it's a love. So people perceive you as German Lebanese, but you don't perceive yourself that way. You don't really ask yourself this question. So it's a label, and on the one hand, it's what gave the book the attention. It came out in 2016 in Germany when the refugee I don't want to call it crisis, but the issue of refugees became big. So, of course, this was what gave the book the attention and made it big. So, I'm thankful for it, but I'm divided, by that. Yeah. Zwiespältig, yes.
Thank you so much. We have to round up, I think, but you're still here if you want to buy books and get them signed. That's possible over there. But I would really like to thank Annelies Verbeke, Pierre Yerewan, Rodan Al-Khalidi for your contribution. And also the play is still, you can still go there, or is it sold out, or based on the book? It just started. So you can still go.
They had a big successful.
Wat doen
Uitverkocht in Amsterdam. They sell it. All was full.
But there will be a reprise, or
I think in Hague also, and in Utrecht, and in Groningen. Yes.
And also, if you want to read this and more of Pierre Yerewan, coming up is Lied van de Vermiste.
Yes.
And Annelies is working on a next story collection that will come out in 2021. So thank you for your attention.